Ajusta Tu Corona was a dream of mine since I was very young. I didn't bring it to fruition until I was much older. And basically what it is we all have a story to tell. And a lot of people were not aware of and they were a little bit shocked to find out what our humble beginnings were and how we became so successful. So never underestimate the power of your story. It is inspirational, it is motivational, it can save someone's life. My message to all the women out there, to everyone out there who may be facing adversity, never forget how amazing you are. Never forget how exceptional you are. Ajusta tu corona and keep it moving.
Well, good evening and welcome to Conversations with Ajusta Tu Corona. I'm sorry, I just get a little bit emotional every time I see that introduction. One, because I absolutely love this song. And two, because I feel, it's not that I feel, it's that I am speaking from my heart. Thank you to all of you that took out the time to join me this evening. I have another amazing guest. It is Dr. Lori Monaco, and she's going to speak on narcissistic abuse and abuse syndrome. So trauma syndrome, I'm sorry. So I'm going to bring her on so we can speak to her because she has so many things going on right now. I'm super excited to have her here. And she's going to tell you a little bit about each. Hi, Dr. Lori.
Hi, Lillian. I love the entrance. I love the entrance. Like, is that now? I'm going to ask this because I watch the show, but I'm always coming in after it's already started. So I love. Is that new, or you've been doing that one for a bit? I love it. It's awesome.
That one is new.
Okay.
We've had others with the other girls involved, and I just have this amazing social media person who creates videos for me. So she changes them up for me constantly because I get bored easily. Lori, I am so excited that you are here. I mean, you just wear so many hats and you have so many talents. And I just want to let everyone know how I met you. I happened to meet Lori through my friend Margarita, who is on the morning show Viva Café con Leche with her. And we brought her on to one of the Ajusta Tu Corona events and absolutely loved her. Found out that she had these programs about making people laugh and being happy. And I went to one of them and I absolutely loved it. It's amazing. You should do those again. I haven't seen you do a happy.
I haven't.
So, Lori, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am so by trade, I'll start with my career. By trade, I'm a chiropractic physician. In fact, I just hit my 23rd year. The 29th, I celebrated 23 years as a chiropractor.
Congratulations.
And while I've been in practice for all that time, it's not my main staple because in the last few years, I started coaching. Prior to that, though, after I graduated chiropractic school, I started teaching post-secondary. So I was teaching things like human anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, neuroanatomy, and physiology. And I loved teaching. That was my thing. And I'd always been a public speaker since chiropractic school. So I've been doing those for a really long time. And then the coaching piece came in as a result of me hitting a very, very deep, dark place. You know, they always say the dark night of the soul. Mine lasted 6 months. It wasn't overnight. And I hit my rock bottom place. And in the process of teetering on whether I should just stay or go, because that's how bad it was, I opted to stay. And at that point, I decided to really change my life because the same thing kept happening to me. And I knew I played a role. And so I had to figure out who I was. And so went into the deep dive of personal development. And it's not that I didn't do it all these years prior. I mean, I was around that stuff since it was called self-help. Remember back in the day, Lily, it was called self-help. They changed the name. But I mean, I walked over hot coals at a Tony Robbins weekend seminar in like 1989. but yet all that knowledge, I couldn't get out of my own way because I just had such a deep set belief of that I wasn't enough and that I was a loser and I wouldn't amount to anything. And I just deserved the worst of the worst. And that's exactly what I got. And with that coming out and falling in love with myself, I decided I wanted to teach people, what I like to not be that way. And having lived with depression for 30 years at that point, I'm like, there's got to be something else, And so that's what I did. I sort of fell in love with myself and then decided I want to coach on this and I want to teach workshops on this. And then sort of evolved, and then finally just recently evolved into specifically concentrating on individuals who are suffering from toxic relationship or narcissistic relationship abuse, because coincidentally that seemed to be a lot of the individuals I was attracting in my coaching, and worked out perfectly because I have a lot of life experience on that. So really well.
That is a lot. She has a lot more to share, but I wanted to say hello, good evening to Richard, our number one fan. He never misses a Thursday. And
hi, Richard.
Lori, before we delve into people who have suffered from narcissistic abuse or narcissistics who have narcissistic syndrome, what is a narcissist?
Yes. So, and I'm glad you asked because the word gets thrown around and it's kind of like the hot word in the last couple of years, but a lot of people still don't even really know what it is. So a narcissist, technically speaking, is the full term is narcissistic personality disorder. And it falls under the gamut of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm forgetting it, but it's a class B, type of mental disorders, and they're like antisocial disorders, and things like a borderline personality disorder. I can't think of the other ones at this moment, but what it is that it's a personality trait, and the person, in order for them to be diagnosed with it, they have to have X amount of traits, and they have to have it for X amount of period of time. Or they have to exhibit it all the time. The thing is, though, that, and I'll explain what they are in a second, but the thing is that most narcissists will never admit that they are a narcissist, number one, and they will never admit that they have a problem. So they will never go and get diagnosed. So it's something like, according to the Center for Disease Control or something like that, it's like 600, or National Institute of Health, NIH, it's like 600,000. It's not that common, but actually it's really quite common. And so the most common signs of narcissism are the individual is very obsessed with themselves. And sometimes it's not that obvious, but they're always first. So they are manipulative. They lie. Those are very classic signs. They're very controlling. They are very insecure individuals overall. Some of them you would never even know that they are, but they're all about validation. So they have to always validate themselves in one way or another. So as a result, they develop these really horrific behaviors that, like they'll be obsessive, they'll get addictive behaviors, they're liars, they're cheaters, that type of personality, because they're always having to validate themselves, like prove to themselves that they've got it. This is them, and as a result, they take down whoever they're with. I mean, they literally are like parasites. So if you define parasite, like according to medical terminology, a parasite is an organism that lives off a host for the survival or the betterment of that entity, right? So the parasite is only there to make itself survive and keep going. And if it kills the host in the process, like if that in a parasite's case, then it will do it and just move on to another host. And narcissists are like that. They take, and it's a lot of mental and emotional abuse. It could also be physical abuse. But it's the mental and emotional abuse piece that, they don't leave scars. And there's no legislation for it either. So you can't call the police and say, my husband's manipulating me, or my wife is lying to me and I'm losing my mind because of it, they'll like laugh at you on the phone. But if they were physically abusive, then that would get them over there. And that's got to change. Like that type of legislation has got to change. They're so manipulative. They manipulate law enforcement. They manipulate court systems. I've heard some horrible stories of individuals divorcing a narcissist, and the person who never could care less about those kids and all of a sudden becomes the father of the year, manipulates the system. Even the women have gotten jailed. They've had their kids taken away from them because the lies are so good and the manipulation is so good. So yeah, they're a problem.
Sounds familiar now. I wanted to say hello to a couple people. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Maria, for being here. You said that they never seek help because they never think that anything is wrong with them.
Correct.
So what you're saying is the person that is seeking therapy is actually the victim?
Yes.
The person from, okay.
Yes. And a lot of times, Lillian, they don't even know that the reason they're seeking therapy has to do with the fact they're in a narcissistic relationship. So they'll often seek therapy because they feel like they're losing their mind, they're depressed, they're anxious, and they go and see that. And the unfortunate thing, and I'm not knocking therapists, right? Because I make it really clear. I do a lot of talks and webinars on narcissism and all sorts of elements of it. And I'm not a therapist. Like I'm not a psychotherapist or anything like that. But I've done my research and I've done my self-study, and I have my life school, of it. And most therapists are not really even privy to it, or they don't really fully understand it. So they can't even identify when someone comes in with narcissistic abuse syndrome, or even better, there's those that do, family and relationship, therapy. So marriage counseling, they'll go to see the therapist. Now that sometimes they will go see the therapist then because they don't want to hear the wife complain anymore. And I'm saying it like, as a male a male narcissist to a female, they're both genders. I mean, narcissists, you could have a narcissistic female, but it tends to be more males than females. And since the demographic here is mostly females, we can sort of leave it as that conversation, but you can fill it in and say, if I'm saying husband, I also mean wife. But they'll show up to therapy, and the therapist, they'll completely dupe the therapist, and they'll twist it because that's what they do. And they twist everything. And the therapist will start to go after the victim and say, yeah, I think you're being too hard on him. He's really trying. And meanwhile, the narcissist just completely manipulated the situation. Yeah.
Ooh, I know some of those.
Yeah.
So we have a gentleman who would like to know question of the week. And we're just going to be brief on this because this could probably take up the whole hour. But he would like to know, do you think that Will Smith has been broken by Jada?
Oh, God. All right. So there's that, it's such a good question. We have to thank these famous people who just behave badly, so they give us all something to talk about and analyze. So I've watched Red Table Talk. I've watched interactions with Jada Pinkett Smith, and I'm also in the process. Like I've been training to be a deception detector. So like I'm actually taking classes on reading things. I've been doing it for a while, so I have it down to not to a science at all. But I watch people now, and I watch their facial expressions, and I watch their body language, and there's something off about her. And I've kind of now this is my opinion, and I'm not, I kind of felt like she was narcissistic, or she is. Okay. According to what I've read, she's claiming that she's been abused by a narcissist. She didn't say that it was Will. She's just saying that in her past, she's been abused by a narcissist. And that's possible. Sometimes when a person has been abused, they can develop narcissistic tendencies and almost look like a narcissist when they're actually abused. Okay, so that's a possibility. But here's what I noticed when I was watching the video. When Chris Rock was saying this, they panned on them, and Will Smith was laughing, like genuine laughing. He wasn't, and as Chris Rock kept going, you could see Jada's face, like Jada's face. She what she had on her face was contempt. She didn't have that she felt bad or that she was sad because of what he was saying. She had a face of contempt on, which is a negative thing. Like it's like she would have went up there herself and slapped him. And then the problem is they didn't show them after. But my thing is, if I'm filling in the blank, my thing is I feel like he felt obligated. He probably looked at her and he probably saw her face and she probably shot him a look, and he felt the need to go up there. Now, based on that analysis, he's the abused. That's what that would mean, is that he's the abused, that he's the one that, because that's what happens when a person is being abused by a narcissist. They will do things that they normally don't do. They will go against their own values, and if his value was to be respectful and stay steadfast, even if he didn't agree with what was being said, that can be thrown out the window by the intimidation of the other person. And again, I mean, that's just my analysis. I didn't see, if it would have been really cool if they had filmed the actual situation, like, of them before he went up there, And listen, I listened to what Chris Rock said. He didn't say anything about her alopecia, because that's the big topic. I have alopecia. I mean, I'm going bald. And, if I shaved my head and they said, oh, you shaved it, you look like G.I. Jane, I would have said, yeah, I mean, I would have been upset. But I get where she's coming from. But yeah, I kind of agree. I kind of feel like that's the dynamic between that couple,
The next question we have from our audience. That's a great answer.
Oh, I love this. I love these Q&A. It's me.
Do you think,
fabulous.
Okay. First of all, Milagro says body language says a lot. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And the next question is, do you think a narcissist seeks therapy or hides behind church to put on a show for attention?
That's a very specific type of narcissist. They fall under the category of covert narcissists. These are individuals who are they are so emphatically big on values that they're preaching it all the time. They're making sure everybody stays in check. Those individuals won't, just like any narcissist, they won't go to therapy because they'll never think there's anything wrong with them. In fact, they're going to, especially those individuals, will think that they know more than the standard therapist. So they're not going to want to ever go to therapy because they're going to be telling them how to do their job. And there's not as many of those. However, they're pretty dangerous because they hide behind their outer exterior, because that's, narcissists have a very interesting facade. They let the world see what they want you to see.
Yes.
And then they're completely different on the back end, unless they're a malignant narcissist. Malignant narcissists are just very dangerous. They're masochistic. They don't even apologize for it. They're mean, and they'll do it in front of anybody, anywhere, anytime. But covert narcissists are, they have their private personality, and then they have their outward. And those individuals hiding behind religion or whatever, they come across like they're the most, highly regarded individual. And yet they're the ones that are in the back doing really bad stuff. But then there's always a justification for it. And yeah, those are scary people. Those are the ones that, get you to be in like a cult. But some religions are like that, where people are just following and giving like thousands and thousands of dollars of their hard-earned living because they believe so much in what the individual's preaching.
That's scary.
Yep, all narcissists. We see this a lot in politics. We see this a lot in leaders, of big organizations, people that are very wealthy. Not saying that they're all like that. It's just, it goes because it's kind of like the territory. There's this debate on whether narcissism is it nurture, like if the person's raised that way, or if they're genetic, if they inherit it. And it's funny because you read, like, I read this research and I read I don't read the research because research is just boring to me sometimes. I read the papers after, like the synopsis of it. And it's both, but a lot of them still lean towards nurture, which I have to agree with. But there is a potential for inherited possibility. So, which is scary, but it is more so how they're raised. And so if they're raised to be a certain way, it's not a surprise that they get attracted to those fields that really like celebrate that type of behavior, like politics.
I'm sorry. I need to ask because I didn't understand what you just stated. You said that a narcissist comes from the way that they're raised.
Yeah. So nurture would be the way that they're raised, and then nature would be genetics, like what they inherited.
Okay.
And so most believe that it is the way they're raised. And I agree. I think that's the biggest piece of it. Maybe it's like an 80-20, like 80% this way, 20% that way, or maybe even 90% and 10% inherited.
So the ones that are by nurture, as you say,
Yeah.
their parents are the ones that caused their mental instability.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Okay, so let's explain. So here's the way that individuals can become narcissistic. Is they could be raised by narcissistic parents or whoever their caregiver is. If their caregiver is narcissistic, they have a much greater potential to become narcissistic. They also have a greater potential to become to have a abuse syndrome. However, what seems to be more common is that they're raised by very enabling parents or caregivers. So they're given a lot, because one of the other characteristics of narcissism is an entitlement, that they want their way all the time. And some believe that it's when they're raised that way, where they're constantly given, they're constantly praised, they're constantly, they're never allowed to really work things out mentally and emotionally on their own, then they create this persona of themselves, and then it cultivates into, lack of empathy as they get older, and it's me. And it doesn't, listen, every child is narcissistic when they're young. It's proven. When they're 2, 3, 4 years old, everything is about them. That's just the way it is. Even younger, actually, from birth until about 4, they're all narcissistic if you were to watch them. But that changes as they learn, as they interact with other people and other children, and as they're raised, they understand that, okay, I can be selfish sometimes, but I also have to understand that there's a level of compassion that I have to have, and empathy, and I have to be kind, and I have to be considerate. And they believe that a lot of these children, that they're just never, they don't have to be. So they don't bother. And as they get older, it's never cultivated. You have to cultivate that. So it's not uncommon for a lot of these individuals to become substance abusers, because there's this constant need for something. And so they can get addicted very easily to things. And it doesn't even have to be a substance. They can get addicted to things like porn. They can get addicted to sex. In fact, that's really common with narcissists. But the individuals who are around them can also become addicted to things as well, as a way of a coping mechanism, because the narcissistic personality is so toxic that it's very hard to have a normal type of life with these individuals. It looks normal on the outside, but it's really deep down. It's just like what we say about social media, right? What you're seeing on social media, people are happy, they're smiling. It's like you're only seeing part of the story. That and then sometimes we get upset about it. We're like, oh, their life is so perfect, or this, they're that, and then we feel down about ourselves. But their own people will only let you see what they want you to see, and and they don't do that because they're narcissistic. They do that because they want to only celebrate the good things. But a narcissist only wants you to see that because they want to bring you into their web. And then once they bring you in, the real them will come out. But at that point, you're already bonded to them. You're already like caught.
It's amazing. What I was studying something that said, and as you stated before, the narcissist will not seek therapy. So the person that is the victim of the narcissist seeks therapy. What are some of the things that you believe would help that person? For example, if I'm going to you and seeking therapy because I've been with a and the therapist tells me that person is never going to change, what are some of the suggestions that you give in your coaching, like just a couple of things to be able to deal with a narcissist?
And I'm glad you said that, Lillian, because they can't change. They just don't. The only ones that can change are the ones that have narcissistic tendencies. They actually aren't full blown. They don't have the narcissistic personality disorder. And those would be the ones that would be willing to go to therapy and are aware that, I do see these things in myself and I don't want to be that way anymore. So what happens is the individual who's coming to me and saying, I'm in this relationship, I actually get a lot of them after they're out of the relationship.
Okay.
Because a lot of these narcissists will never let their significant other even go to therapy if there's a remote chance that they're getting talked about, like they become the problem. So they'll control things to prevent that happening. They'll either, not allow them to make the appointments, or they'll control the finances so they can't do that. But so what I do when I do work with these women is, you've got to break all ties with a narcissist, and it's easier said than done. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. If you're an individual who's separated from a narcissist, you have children that are under 18, you have to have a relationship with this narcissist. I mean, you have to. And it's not going to be easy. And so what I usually teach them is I build them back up again to the person that's always been there, and help them learn how to set healthy boundaries and how to handle dealing with the narcissist. Because the narcissists are, what's interesting about them, they can be very mean. They can be so manipulative that you don't even know if you're coming or going. But here's the good thing. So it's not like hopeless. The good thing is that most of them, with the exception of the malignant narcissists who are really like borderline psychopaths, most of them have a very, they do things all the same way. And so what I teach them is, these are the words that they use. These are the expressions that they use. These are this is how they'll do things and say things, and like they're very passive aggressive. And what they're looking for is to engage the person. They're trying to engage the person to get them to do something or say something that they'll regret to be able to use against them. And so I teach them to watch out for these things and to not engage them. Like the best thing you could ever do with a narcissist is ignore them. They hate that. They hate that because they love the drama. They want the engagement. So if you're like shutting them off, I've seen it personally on my end, where you just don't send a text back, and all of a sudden you get this barrage of texts that are escalating and escalating and escalating. And then they'll be followed by, you know what, I'm sorry. I just was like, and you're like, what is wrong with this person? Like, how many personalities does this person have, But very typical abusive type of behavior. So that's what I teach them. And I teach them to know that they can live without this individual, because a lot of them they get what's called a trauma bond. And I know because I've had it and still deal with it. And it's very hard to break, and it could take a while to break, because you've allowed things to be put into your head that were manufactured by the narcissist, and you believed it. And so it's really hard to retrain your brain to think a different way. It's possible, but it takes time. So, but that's what I do, is just build them back up again, and then get them to the point where That's why I have the name. Everybody who says to me, where's the name come from? The Badass Buddha. It stands for 50% namaste, 50% go F yourself. And I tell this to the clients. That's that one day you're going to be like that. You're going to be like, I'm calm, I'm at peace. And when this individual starts to come back in, go F yourself, because I'm not going to play your game anymore. And for most narcissistic relationships, it's doable. But there are some really, really toxic ones out there, to the point where they need extra help. They need to not just work with a coach. They need a therapist. They need to have a very significant tribe around them in case this individual comes back or tries to keep, and they don't. The funny part is, you would think that if you say, okay, I can't do this anymore and I want out, and the narcissist would just leave and find somebody else to go manipulate, which they do, by the way, but they never are finished with you. And that's the other part that's really awful. They will, depending on the level of the type that they have, they will just keep bothering you. And it could be years later. And it's awful. And there's a point where they might get bored and they just move on and that's it. But it could take years. And it could be, they don't even have to have children. Your kids could be grown up. I've heard horror stories of the husband just continuously badgering, manipulating, making really awful comments. The woman's dating somebody and they're coming back at him. And it's terrible. Changing numbers, and they find out the number and they get it back again. And yeah.
How can that not be considered a crime? So when I work with the women of domestic violence, of adversity, it's physical, it's mental, it's sexual, it's financial. And in getting therapy, we recognize what the abuses are and we do something about it. So how can dealing with a personality like that, that's controlling the finances, that is, it's basically harassing, how can that not be?
If it gets to a level where it's provable harassment, then yes. If the woman is showing, I have these text messages, I have threats through email, he's left me threatening messages, like voicemail messages, and they can prove that, then they could always get a restraining order and things like that. The interesting thing though is that the narcissist will mess with you so much that, they'll say things, and this is really common with abuse. They'll get really, really mad and they'll verbally abuse you, and then they'll turn around and make it your fault. They'll say, see, if you didn't do this, I would have never reacted this way. Absolutely. Like if you didn't behave this way, or if you didn't say that, I would have never got this upset. So you upset me. And even an individual who has been separated from this person will still be very fearful about requesting help because of that trauma bond. And they're like, if he gets arrested, he's not beating me. And then they justify it. Like, well, he's not physically beating me. And, I don't see him all the time. And he must've been really upset. And, if I call the cops and he gets arrested, it's going to ruin his life. And then might be more scary if that's the case, So it's the same thing with domestic violence. It's Absolutely. The same play. In fact, I'm convinced that the guys anybody that practices domestic violence, any abuser, they have to be narcissistic. And if they're not, they definitely have the tendency for it, because how could you have such complete lack of empathy for somebody that you love? That's not love. It's control. And narcissists are the kings and queens of control.
Unbelievable. Tell us, Lori, you just recently became an author.
I did. Finally. Yes, in November. Yep.
Tell us about it.
So in November, we released a compilation book. I created the compilation book, and it's a collection of 9 of us. There are 9 authors, including myself, called Her Badass Story, and it's a collection. It's women unapologetically. Let me see. How do I word this? I don't remember how I worded it. It's unapologetically being the badass in their lives. They went from trauma to triumph to transformation, and so they share their stories of what they went through, how they got out of it, and then what they learned from it. And the stories are very diverse, just as the women that were writing them. It's, there's some of them are health stories, some of them are relationship stories, some of them are situational stories, and some of them career work. And it's just to show how amazingly resilient we are as women and how strong we are. And the goal of the book really is to really empower other women and, see which stories they connect with and say, gosh, if they can get through this, then I can get through this. And so that was the premise of the book. I had the idea of creating something where people could share their stories, but then I decided to do it in a book back in April, and then we released in November.
Do you have a copy with you?
Oh my gosh, yes, I do. Thank goodness I had one.
Well, that's why I was turning my head, because I looked to see if I had my copy here next to me, and it's in my bedroom.
Yep, that's it.
So it's called Her Badass Story.
Yes.
It is available on Amazon.
It is. Yes. You can even go onto my website and order it. And you can even check in with any of the authors. You could see all the authors on my website. There's a link. And yeah, you can order directly from the authors, or you can order it on Amazon. Absolutely.
It's amazing. I personally have read it and loved it.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you are going to do a second version.
I am. Yep. I really had seen, I thought of it as a series, and considering what the feedback that we got from people that read the book, even people I didn't even know. I mean, it was interesting to see some of these reviews popping up here and there, even on Amazon or elsewhere, of I didn't even know these people, and even asked the authors, do you know these people? And they're like, no, because of course, your family, you would expect family or friends to say that, but and it was incredible, and it did exactly what I had thought it would. So with that, I had wanted it to be a series, and then I decided, you know what, then I'll put out volume 2 this year. And so we are releasing in June. So I'm not sure exactly the release date. It's probably going to be the end of June, but that's the goal, is to release the end of June for Her Badass Story volume 2. The goal is to have 15 to 20 authors this time to make it even more impactful. We're also allowing the authors to have more words in their chapter so that they can really express themselves, which I'm really happy about. We were restricted with the last publisher, but we are with a different publisher, and we're going to go longer with this one. And so I'm still looking. We've filled a bunch of slots already. We still have a few slots left, and we're still looking for women to join us that want to come on and share their stories. You don't have to be in business to do it. Although it helps because you do have your profile at the end, your bio, and it'll help for business. But some women just do it because it's cathartic. They do it because they need to let it go. Like, finally, just get it out there and share it, and knowing that they can inspire or help someone else, then it's worth the investment for them.
Absolutely. How exciting. And there's some women, and I talk about this every week, that feel that their story has no value, or maybe, people have suffered more than me, or someone's gone through something worse than me. It doesn't matter. Like, your story is your story.
That's
and
correct.
and someone could have gone through less than you, but the impact or the memory or the trauma that it caused you is no less than someone whose trauma was bigger.
That's right.
So I always state, share your story, tell people your story. And this is a perfect opportunity. So if you are ready to let go of that baggage and tell your story and be done with it and want to put it in print for therapeutic reasons, please contact Dr. Lori Monaco. She'd love to chat with you.
I would. And here's the other beautiful part of it too. The publisher, she's she teaches writing. And so what she's going to also do as part of this is she's going to teach the authors how to write, even if they've written a book before. She's going to teach them a different way of writing to connect, with their higher power and ground themselves and let it flow. And just that alone to me is really important, because that will allow things just to flow freely, not just for writing the story, but anything that person does from that point going forward, even if it's just journaling on the, every single day in their journal, that it just flows better and they'll be able to express themselves better. So I'm excited about that piece, because I was never taught how to write really. So this is going to be very cool.
I'm excited for you. Lori, let's go back a little bit. The reason that I changed the subject so quickly is because I wanted to make sure we got the information in for Badass Story, because this narcissistic topic is just amazing to me.
Oh yeah.
And scary at the same time. The more that you talk, the more that I think about, I definitely know a few narcissists out there. When you say trauma bonding, what is that? What do you mean by that?
So trauma bond is when the abused feels still very connected to the abuser, that they can't seem to let go, even if they are separated, divorced, not living in the house anymore with the individual, that even their mind, when they're thinking about doing certain things, they hesitate. They don't want to take chances. They're worried that they're being, they get paranoid. They develop depression or anxiety as a result of this. In fact, a lot of abused individuals develop PTSD, but they develop CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, which is actually a newer diagnosis. And it's that they still cannot function normally. You would think, okay, like think of it this way, that if, let's say there was a threat, like somebody broke into your house or something like that, and you were in that state of stress response, and the person left and, they got arrested and everything was good and you were safe. Now granted, you'd be a little upset and you'd be a little freaked out for the first few days, but then you'd like calm down, and then you'd be like, okay, I could sort of move on. And little by little, each day would get easier and easier. But somebody who's trauma bonded is not only not letting it go, but they still feel compelled to stay connected to the narcissist. They'll make sure that they do things for the narcissist, because narcissists get very dependent, as independent as they can be. They're very dependent on their abused, the ones that they're abusing. So the person will still do things for them. Like I've heard of stories where they've stolen so much money. Like there's a couple of shows on Netflix right now with talking about that. I think it's the Tinder Swindler. That's one of them. Tinder Swindler or something. And they'll even just give the money. And the other one was the Bad Vegan. That one's an interesting one. That's also on Netflix, where she knew she was something was off, but she kept giving him money. And then after all of that, she still called him to talk to him, even after he like swindled millions of dollars from her. And also she was in prison because of him. So the trauma bond is very serious. And, women especially need to understand that this is a real thing and they can get past it, and they need to not be afraid, and they need to just rebuild themselves, build up healthy boundaries, and be okay to say no. Like if they text you, that's why we always say, just cut off ties if you can, because they will always want to reel you back in. And it's not just a significant other. I mean, you can have a family member that's, and it's very hard to take yourself away from a family member, especially if it's like your parent. If it's your parent or it's a sibling might be easier, but a parent, and that's just to walk away. And because in the end, you look like the bad guy. Everybody's going to think, oh my God, how could you abandon your mother? How could you abandon your father and not talk to them? And it's for your own health and well-being. But you still have that bond of, I have to show up for family reunion, family get-togethers, and I've got to make a phone call here and there. These obligations, those are all trauma bonding situations.
That is really rough then when it comes to a family member, because you still want to see the rest of the family. So do you alienate yourself from the entire family just to stay away?
The interesting thing is a lot of times the narcissistic family member, any narcissist will tend to alienate you purposefully when you're with them. And then, so in the case of family member though, what they'll usually do is they'll make you look like the bad guy. They'll be like, oh, I don't know. I have no idea why they don't want to come around here anymore. And they've just abandoned me. And the family will just buy into it unless other family members are privy to the manipulation that individual does. I've seen it on my end. Like the reason I basically, I have it in my bio. It's so funny. I'm a narcissist, a former narcissist and asshole super attractor. And the reason I've had them in like friends, significant others, bosses. And I really started to think about this. I'm like, why was I attracting all these people? And it really came down to the fact that I grew up with one. Like my brother is a narcissist. He'll never admit to it, but when I was younger, it really didn't matter. He was very good to me when I was younger because there was a big age difference and you're a child, and he loved to play with me and he was my hero. I really looked up to him. But it was as I got older that I started to notice things, and his behavior changed because whenever I would disagree with him, he would behave a certain way. And that is when I started to realize the manipulation and how he manipulated my mother and my father. And he was really horrible to my sister a lot of times, not all the time, but a good portion of it growing up. And my mother, being such an enabler, she didn't want to deal with anything, and anything you would point out and say, this is really not okay. It was like this, and it still is. So with that, I've just said to myself, I can't be around him. I can't. It's just not good for my spirit. And I don't care if I look like the bad guy. He's very charming. You would love him. Everybody loves him when they first meet him. He's very funny. And even the family, they just, but I don't need them to figure that out. They don't need to know why I feel the way I do. And I just know that I feel better about it. And so, but I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like with a parent. It would just be horrible, really, because of the control overall that they have within the family, the dynamic. So yeah. I couldn't imagine that.
It's crazy. Can you point out, like you said, your brother was wonderful to you, and as you got older, you didn't care for his behavior.
Right.
When you look back at when he was younger, are there things that you noticed that he had all along growing up? Or do you think that he started to develop them later?
Well, again, I looking back, I do, but it was more with regards to my sister, like with his relationship with my sister, how he treated my sister. He was physically abusive to her. He was verbally abusive to her. But I do remember he always had a very bad temper. Mm-hmm. There was a couple times whenever he would get pissed off, he would run down the steps and kick the basement door. And then after a point, the door would broke and then it fell off the hinges. There was one time he was so angry that he took our family dog, and threw her down the basement steps. She didn't even do anything to him. Like he was so angry. So And my mother would always be like, oh, just calm down, or just stay out of his way, completely enabling the behavior, as opposed to, are you like, I would have beat the crap out of him for like even abusing the dog, because that was technically abuse. So he wasn't mean to me, but it was when I became a teenager that's when, you're a teenager, man, you're like doing your own thing, you're saying your own stuff. And that's when I would notice that he would not be as nice to me. And as long as you agreed with him, he was totally fine. But I think what really sealed it for me as an adult was, it wasn't even towards me. It was the behaviors I was seeing he was doing towards his children and his wives that really got to me. And that's when I said, okay, your values, buddy, are completely different than mine. I have no respect for you. And because he lived out of the country for a really long time. And then when he came back, he actually came back here and he didn't leave. I was like, that's when it really hit me. And that's when I decided I can't deal with this individual, because he's so manipulative. And it's like, I feel like I'm on the outside sometimes, like watching a show, like watching it unfold in front of me like a reality show. But that's the beauty of awareness that you get. And that's the other thing that I teach, between the workshops that I teach, and I'm in Clubhouse a lot teaching. I'm teaching individuals the signs to look for. Like, this is the behavior. These are the things they say. These are the things they do. So that when you're next to one, you could say, oh, wow, that or an individual might actually be one. And that means I need to put my guard up.
Absolutely. On the bottom of the screen, on the ticker going across, is also Lori's Instagram page at the Badass Buddha 1. Lori, this is going to be our final question.
All right.
For people who are looking for a narcissistic life coach, what are the questions that they should be asking this coach?
A big one is confidentiality. I mean, I think it's understood that most coaches keep things confidential. It's not like you're a doctor. Like, I have to be HIPAA compliant as a doctor, but as a coach, it's sort of understood. But that's a big one, because of the abusive nature of the narcissist, things that get said really cannot be shared. And if an individual the abuser comes in and tries to, be a part of it or control it, so it's important for them to ask the coach, listen, if we're working together, it's just us working together. Like, it's us, it stays between us. I open up to you. And of course they're going to say, yes, that's absolutely true. You want to know if they have training in working with narcissistic types of situations, narcissistic abuse syndrome, because, not every coach is able to handle somebody who's going through that type of trauma. So you want to definitely work with somebody that has that. I mean, I'm sure there's certifications out there. I don't personally have a certification on that. However, I've done my homework. I've done enough hours of study to know how to work with individuals going through that type of trauma. And let me see, what else could they ask them? They could probably ask things like, how much information do you have on the different types of narcissistic personalities, which they should have everyone down pretty well. How long would it take? Would you be able to see changes? How quickly? We'd never be able to say exactly, but I think most would say that, I mean, you should at least start to feel some calmness within you. I don't know, like within, well, it depends. I mean, if they're still living with the narcissist, that's a little bit more challenging. You stumped me a little bit on that question. I guess it's just, the other thing is, how dedicated the coach is to it. I mean, for me, I didn't purposely become a coach for this. In fact, I just really started advertising it because I just was working with individuals like this. And so now I've actually feel that out of all the coaching that I've done, this is my passion and purpose. So I think that's a real big key too. I think they really need to know if that coach is really that devoted to getting them past the toxic behavior and that abuse that they're living with, the trauma.
For our audience, they really need to understand that a lot of the people that are coaches, and they usually specialize on one specific topic, and it's usually something that they have been through themselves.
Yes.
For example, a doctor wants to be a doctor to help everybody, but life coaches tend to want to speak and help and be therapeutic and help you in matters of what they have personally been through.
Yes.
So we thank you for sharing your story. I absolutely loved it. It's like I have a lot more questions, so I definitely have to have you back. We have Milagros who says she loves you.
Oh,
The
Milagros.
audience was very engaged and commenting throughout. So, with this StreamYard that I use, I never know at which point they commented. Like, what are they saying yes to? What are they saying always?
I know. Yep, I know.
I guess one day we'll figure it out. But as always, to my audience, thank you for being here tonight. Never forget how amazing you are, how much you are loved, how exceptional you are. Ajusta tu corona and keep it moving. Laurie, please give a message.
Can I end with what I usually end with? Since
Whatever you like. Whatever you like.
You're stronger than you know. Of course, you know that. And never stop. Be unapologetically courageous. And from me, my ending thing is always be you, be real, and be extraordinary.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Good night.